Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the last episode of Hawkeye, as well as some of my overall thoughts about the series as a whole. This is probably the best overall Disney Plus Marvel show that has been released. And the reason I say this is because over the course of these past 6 episodes, I have not really noticed anything in terms of, lulls in the writings of each episode, no inconsistencies in the progression of the story, and it didn't feel like there was really any fillers or slowdown moments, and at the same time it didn't feel like things were being rushed or going too fast. Of course, there are a few things that I think I would have liked a little bit more of in the story, specifically things more about just Clint's past and getting a little bit more of the backstory than we actually end up getting. But regardless, I do think that they do a very good job with the components that they've chose to juggle here, primarily the different new characters like Yelena and Kate, and of course characters like Kingpin being brought back into this fold. And yeah, I just think it's been a very fun ride while juggling all of these different characters, but I do think that having a little bit more of a focus on Barton, at least at the start, would have been nice, specifically for those of us who've been waiting to get a lot more of Barton throughout this series. I still think that the show gives us a lot more than we would have otherwise seen, but I do think that it would have been nice to get just a tad bit more before finishing off this series. That means perhaps getting something like another Ronin scene, where he's actually, going crazy and having more flashbacks to that stuff, or even talking about and showing things that are much sooner than that, like his initial encounter with Black Widow, which we got a slight glimpse towards in the Black Widow film, or things like that. I think would have been very interesting to see, as well as giving us just a slightly different perspective on the Hawkeye character. That being said, I still think that this show is the best Marvel show on Disney Plus, as I said a minute ago, and as a result, it holds a special place in my heart, specifically because it's also a Christmas-themed series. I think it's just a lot of fun to watch. Jumping into the actual episode, I have to talk about the early part of this episode first, which specifically, let's talk about the scene where Clint finally says to Kate that they are partners. And to be honest, this scene just felt so nice because I didn't expect Clint to actually ever say this at all. I thought, him saying earlier on that they're not partners, that they're not a team and whatnot, that was going to be the end of it. And perhaps, despite Clint actually helping in the end and coming back around, it would be up to Kate's character to say, you know what, I don't really need the okay to take up the mantle and prove that the Hawkeye name actually means something, but instead, she's kind of getting that validation from her hero, which is very interesting for me to see, because, Clint himself doesn't really see himself as a role model in this series, and I just think it's interesting that after everything, he does kind of see the potential in Kate and acknowledges that for her, despite knowing the potential risks that exist there. Perhaps it's also because he understands that regardless of what he does, she's really not going to stop, so he might as well be there to help her out on her journey. Furthermore, this scene I think is very fascinating because it has Clint say that they're going to try and help end everything with Kingpin, and he automatically says that Kingpin is the real problem, and I think this is just partially due to a sense of compassion that Clint is showing here, because clearly Eleanor is also in the wrong, but he understands that Eleanor is still Kate's mom, and he's kind of towing the line here in terms of not really just calling her out on being a complicit person in the violence that is the Kingpin, but at the same time he doesn't really discount that, but he's focusing more on the idea that the Kingpin is involved, and that's really what where things need to be focused on moving forward. We need to protect Eleanor from Kingpin's retribution, and I really like that because it kind of shows that Clint understands that this situation's more complex than just stopping the bad guy, and he hasn't really been in situations situations, at least in the MCU, where things haven't been pretty black and white. I mean, for the most part, it's like, hey, we're the Avengers, we're going to stop, Nazis, we're going to stop Hydra, we're going to stop Thanos, and these are very clear villains here, but at the same time, in this situation, he's understanding that it's more complex than that. And I liked that because, Barton has been working for S.H.I.E.L.D. for so long, so clearly he has a lot more tact in what he's doing, but it's just not something that we get to see as often, and so I really appreciate that. That being said, let's actually discuss the Kingpin in this episode. I mean, I just gotta say, watching Vincent D'Onofrio walk back onto my screen as the scariest possible man on this planet. I mean, honestly, he does, like, his role as Kingpin commands more fear than I feel like Thanos did walking in to the screen, because he is just so towering and terrifying to watch in these shows, because even when you first see him on Daredevil, it's like this man instills fear pretty quick, and I just loved seeing this on screen once more. I got chills. It was just such a fun time, because you don't know exactly what he's gonna do to Eleanor. I mean, there's a car there, what's gonna happen? I mean, is that car door gonna be slamming? But no, it doesn't this time. It gets ripped off instead of being slammed into someone's face. So, a little less graphic here now that we're on Disney Plus, but still terrifying to see. That being said, the Kingpin also seems to be having a power-up here. I mean, he gets shot in the chest with an arrow. He's somehow surviving a bullet. I mean, there's no way he's dead. There's no chance that the Kingpin died in Hawkeye, simply because this is the first indication that he's back. I mean, I feel like Marvel wouldn't just bring him back just to kill him off, and if they do, that's kind of a wasted opportunity there. So I think that Vincent D'Onofrio is not gone from the MCU. We're definitely going to see more from him, because it clearly seems as though he can handle a little bit more. He gets a car driven through him and he gets back up. So I think that he's a bit more sturdy this time around. I hope that they connect that or explain how, because, he wasn't like that before, so perhaps he went through some body modification or, did some intense weightlifting in prison. I'm not too sure. But regardless, I think that it's very, very cool that we get to see this man back on our screen, commanding the respect that he deserves, putting fear in all of us comic book fans, looking at this man and waiting for the blood to be spilt. I mean, just a wonderful time. Let's also talk about Yelena and Kate in this episode. And I gotta say, their dynamic just seems so fun, and I feel like they are going to have such good chemistry moving forward, and I think it's going to be so cool to see them potentially on screen together in, a team-up film of some sort later on down the line, or in another series, or whatever we see them in together, because they just seem to have such a good banter. And Florence Pugh's character, I think she does a very good job of balancing some type of comedy and bouncing off the people around her. And especially in this series, I think she was a bit more funny than I remember her being in the Black Widow film. So I really appreciate that. It's just nice, because despite the fact that they're, kind of opposing each other in majority of the scenes that they have in this episode, we see that, they do appreciate each other's skill set. They actually like each other on some level, and, it's just fun. It's just fun, and I like it. It works very well, especially with this series, and it works with the comedy. It works so nice to me, and I really like it. I wasn't sure how I would feel about Yelena being in this series, because I thought it would initially detract from the main storyline, but they weaved her in very well, in that there are a couple of key players in the story, and they all kind of weave together into the tapestry of the show. Despite it only being 6 episodes, it doesn't feel rushed or anything, and Yelena does a good job at integrating with the other characters, especially Hawkeye and Kate, because she does have a clear connection to those people, and it's just very, very cool to see. Okay, let's actually step back a second, and earlier in the episode, we have a moment where Clint says they need more arrows, and you get to see the actual creation of a bunch of trick arrows, which I thought we couldn't see. And I thought this because Clint says that all the shafts are, custom built. There aren't any more trick arrows and stuff like that. But no, I mean, he can make more. He can make more. I think they're like different shafts or potentially the same ones, and he just reuses them again. I don't know. Because before we had to go and get the shafts from before, like the old arrowheads and everything, and this time he's just creating new arrows, but we don't really get an indication as to if the arrow shafts are like the same ones, or if you had to get some new ones, or what's going on there. I'm not too sure, but regardless, it gives us a cool scene to see yet another side of Clint Barton, which is some like technical engineering-esque skills that he has, which I mean I think that honestly every single SHIELD agent has at this point, but it's just cool to see his ingenuity and his ability to put together these tools for himself and prepare for the upcoming battle. It gives another component of Clint's intelligence, which we don't necessarily get highlighted when he's surrounded by characters like Bruce Banner or Tony and the like. So I really, really like that. Similarly, the idea that Kate is actually labeling everything so that they know what's going on, what the arrows are for. I like that partially because, Clint is not using his traditional quiver, I think, and so, potentially the arrows aren't just in random spots, and also he's handing them off to Kate so that she actually knows what's going on there. So I just appreciate that he is thinking more about the team perspective and how the arrows can be best utilized, which is, everyone knows what's going on there. That would be a good idea. And yeah, let's jump into the actual final fight from here. And I gotta say, the entire final fight is just a lot of fun. The battle between the tracksuits and the two Hawkeyes, essentially, in this New York ice rink. I think it's the New York ice rink that is right by the tree. That's why the tree falls in there, right? And I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because of all the trick arrows, and seeing, those people get carried away by the owl, that was a little terrifying, but also hilarious. And I just really enjoy it. I gotta say, this episode is just full of enjoyment, full of Christmas vibes. It's just a lot of fun. I don't really have much to say about the Echo fight in this. I mean, that was kind of the least entertaining part of the final battles. It just kind of was there. But I will talk briefly about the fight between Kingpin and Kate. I honestly thought that Kate would lose here, and I think it would make more sense if she did. But, she finds a way to take down Kingpin. And it's interesting. It's interesting because, he gets hit by a car, he gets shot in the chest with an arrow, and then, it takes the way too dangerous arrowhead to actually do something there, which I guess, fair, because Wilson Fisk is I feel like he's on the upper echelon of normal human, and so, it takes something big to take him out. But still, I think it was interesting there that she was actually able to defeat him on his own. I would have thought that it would take her and Barton working together to do that. It also makes me curious as to whether or not that was the original plan. I feel like before Yelena was involved with this series, perhaps the final fight would have been Clint and Kate working together to fight Kingpin, and because Yelena was in the episode, perhaps they needed to make it such that someone could actually fight Kingpin, and that was just Kate because she was the only one left. That's just my opinion because I don't know. I think that Kate is still pretty green, so the fact that she's able to take out Kingpin here is pretty interesting, especially because she doesn't have any powers, and she's also thrown around like a rag doll in parts of the fight, so it's interesting. I will say that. I don't want to criticize it too heavily because I do like the episode overall, and I like the series, but I don't know, that's just the one piece of the episode that I'm like, I don't fully believe that because of how much I've seen Vincent D'Onofrio destroy a pro boxer. like one of the greatest fighters in the world. So I just want to mention, I do hope that in the future we do get to see Jack and the Larpers again. I thought it was fun to see Jack, use his sword and fight a little bit, but I did wish that we got a little bit more from him. I mean, Jack himself is just a fun character to watch. I mean, he's just kind of like a dude that's very good with his sword, and he's just kind of happy to be alive. And I just think that we need more of that in the MCU. Just characters that are just hyped and excited to jump into the fray. And, he's just a nice guy. He just so happens to be really rich, and that's just his life. On the other hand, I do hope the Larpers show up in some way, shape, or form in other MCU properties. I mean, perhaps something like Spider-Man, if he passes by Grand Central, perhaps he sees them playing or having their roleplay sessions or whatever. I just think it would be cool to have the Larpers be a connective tissue moving forward within the MCU. I think it would be really, really cool. That being said, once the fights and everything are said and done, we do make it home for Christmas. And that is all we were really worried about in this entire series. We didn't care about anything else. All we wanted was Clint Barton to make it home for Christmas, to see his family once more. And I'm very happy that he was able to do this. I'm very happy that he didn't pass during this episode, because I would be very annoyed with Kate for bringing him into this in that situation. I mean, especially after everything Clint has been through, I just think it would have been horrifying for me to see him die on the screen, because I feel like we've already lost too many original Avengers at this point. That being said, once he does make it home for Christmas, he does bring Kate, as she no longer has, I think, a home because her mom's going to jail and everything like that, which honestly is a very, very brave and terrifying move on her part. I mean, to actually be willing to do something like that, despite, all the potential ramifications, as well as, all the potential backlash, both from an emotional standpoint and a societal place. It's just very interesting to see, and I'm very glad that she made the hard call, and, at least she has the Bartons to help her out. That being said, they do cook the Ronin costume, which means it's officially destroyed. I really liked that because it was kind of like a metaphorical letting go of Clint's trauma. Everything tying himself to that is now gone, and I really appreciate that, and it was just fun to see, and it shows the bond between those two characters moving forward. Also, jumping back for a second, I forgot to mention, I really loved the fight between Yelena and Clint, and I really liked this fight because it's just so cathartic to watch for Clint, because this entire series, like most of the shows this year, have been about dealing with loss and grief and sorrow, and we see that throughout this fight. We have Yelena, who is unable to come to terms with, the idea that her sister gave up her life. And then Clint, who has gone through so much trauma and is just so sad because of the loss of his best friend. And this fight is just so cathartic to watch. So nice that they finally, they come to an understanding, more or less, and they're able to move forward from there. And the idea that Clint is the one that actually explains to Yelena what happened, that, she gave up her life to save everyone, that without her, things wouldn't have gone down, the world wouldn't have been saved, people wouldn't have come back. It's great to see. And even Clint explaining that she was the best of all of them and stuff like that, both in this episode and I think the previous ones as well. It's just really nice. Now, before we break, I did want to mention the whole thing with the watch. I feel like it was kind of undercut with the whole Ronin plot and everything like that, and I think that the importance of the watch needed to be upgraded a little bit more. I mean, that's what the tracksuits were looking for in the first place. Did Laura do something to attack the Kingpin way back when? I mean, did they have some history there, or is there a reason why the tracksuits would be looking for her? Because that was what they were looking for, and clearly that watch would somehow lead back to the Bartons, and we're not really made to know why, because it just says that she's Agent 19, the Mockingbird from S.H.I.E.L.D., and I don't know exactly how that ties back to Laura directly, apart from having her codename on it. I mean, no one knows, or no one probably knew who Laura was, so I'm not really too sure about that. I feel like that's kind of a loose end that needed to be addressed a little bit, and it just wasn't. So I will say that is one of my few nitpicks with the series, is that the whole plot plotline with the Watch is kind of thrown to the wayside and kind of not really explained as much as it could have been. That being said, I really, really loved this episode. I think it was maybe not the best of all of the episodes that we have here, but overall the entire series is my favorite out of all the Disney Plus shows. And yeah, that's all I'll really say for this video. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this episode. If you enjoyed, please let me know in the comments below, like the video, and subscribe for more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.